The silence of the archive room was broken only by the soft hum of data processors and the occasional tap of Elena's fingers against the holographic interface. Her eyes burned from hours of continuous research, but something deep in her instincts told her she was close to something significant. The document fragments she discovered were like pieces of an intricate puzzle. Coded transmissions, redacted diplomatic communications, and buried statistical reports painted a disturbing picture. Each piece revealed another layer of a complex conspiracy that stretched back decades, perhaps even centuries. A notification blinked in the corner of her interface. The advanced AI research assistant she developed was working overtime, cross-referencing the fragmented data with historical records. Most researchers would have overlooked the subtle connections, but Elena's system was different. Designed to see patterns where others saw only noise, it began to reveal a narrative that would change everything. The first breakthrough came unexpectedly. A seemingly innocuous trade report from 47 years ago contained a microscopic anomaly, a statistical deviation so small that it would have been dismissed by most researchers. But to Elena, it was a thread that, when pulled, would unravel an entire tapestry of deception. She leaned back, her mind racing. The data suggested a coordinated effort to limit human technological expansion, not through direct conflict, but through a network of subtle economic and diplomatic manipulations. Trade restrictions, research funding blocks, strategic diplomatic isolation, each a small thread in a larger web of control. The holographic display flickered, bringing up a series of complex charts and connection maps. Lines of communication stretched between various galactic institutions, showing an intricate dance of influence that had kept humanity contained. It wasn't a single organization, but a distributed network of power brokers who had systematically worked to prevent Earth from reaching its full potential. Elena's heart raced. She knew the implications of her discovery were enormous. This wasn't just about uncovering a conspiracy. This was about understanding a fundamental truth about humanity's place in the galaxy. Her communication device chirped. Dr. Alejandro Rodriguez, her mentor and head of the Interstellar Research Division, was requesting an immediate secure communication. Elena hesitated for just a moment before accepting the call. "Elena, what have you found?" His voice was carefully controlled, but she could detect an underlying current of excitement. She took a deep breath. "Something big, really big. The suppression of human potential isn't just a theory. It's a documented strategy." Alejandro's holographic image leaned forward. "Show me everything." For the next hour, Elena walked him through her discoveries. Trade reports that showed systematic blocking of human technology patents. Diplomatic communications that revealed a coordinated effort to limit human colonization efforts. Research funding redirected or outright denied without explanation. "They'd been terrified of us," Elena concluded. "Not because we're violent or aggressive, but because they recognize something about human potential that we ourselves haven't fully understood." The research division's secure servers began processing the information. Algorithms designed to protect sensitive discoveries worked in parallel, ensuring the information would be both preserved and strategically revealed. What Elena didn't know, what no one yet understood, was how this discovery would become the first domino in a transformation that would reshape galactic civilization. The conspiracy wasn't just a historical footnote. It was the key to understanding humanity's true destiny among the stars. As the first rays of dawn began to peek through the archive room's smart glass windows, Elena realized her life would never be the same. The universe was about to change, and she was holding the blueprint for that transformation. Her final action of the night was to encrypt a series of data packages. Some would be sent to trusted colleagues. Others would be strategically placed where they would be discovered at precisely the right moment. The truth had a way of finding its way to the surface, and Elena was determined to be its catalyst. Outside the window, the first light touched the orbital research stations. Another day was beginning, but nothing would be the same again. The transformation began in a converted research complex nestled in the Andes Mountains. What appeared to be an ordinary scientific facility was anything but ordinary. Beneath layers of holographic camouflage, and quantum-encrypted security systems, humanity's most brilliant minds worked in perfect synchronization. Dr. Kira Nakamura stood at the center of a massive circular room, surrounded by holographic displays that danced with complex algorithms and breakthrough research. Her team represented a radical approach to innovation, experts from every conceivable discipline, working together with an intensity that bordered on the supernatural. "We're not just developing technology," Kira explained to a group of young researchers during a rare moment of collective briefing. "We're reimagining the fundamental way intelligent systems interact with the universe." The room hummed with potential. Quantum computing nodes developed entirely new mathematical models in seconds. Biological interface systems learned and adapted faster than any previous technology. Artificial intelligence modules worked in perfect harmony, each one solving complex problems while simultaneously teaching the others. One of the most promising projects was the Adaptive Communication Network. Traditional interstellar communication relied on fixed protocols and massive infrastructure. The team was developing something entirely different, a living, breathing network that could adapt, learn, and evolve in real time. Kai Rodriguez, a young engineer with an unprecedented understanding of quantum entanglement, demonstrated the early prototype, a series of microscopic communication nodes, each no larger than a human hair, could instantaneously share information across impossible distances. More impressively, they could learn and modify their own communication protocols. "Watch this," Kai said, his fingers dancing across a holographic interface. A complex series of mathematical models began to shift and change, revealing communication patterns that seemed to defy traditional understanding of physics. In another section of the facility, Dr. Aisha Okoye led a team developing adaptive medical technologies. Their research went far beyond traditional medical science. They were creating systems that could understand and respond to biological challenges at a molecular level, potentially revolutionizing healthcare for every species in the galaxy. The medical team had discovered something remarkable. Human genetic diversity, long seen as a complexity, was actually an incredible advantage. Where other species had become genetically stagnant, humans maintained an extraordinary capacity for adaptation. "It's not just about treating diseases," Dr. Okoye explained during a private briefing. "We're developing systems that can understand and respond to biological challenges in real time. Imagine a medical technology that doesn't just treat a condition, but learns from it and prevents future occurrences." Beneath the surface of this research was a deeper strategy. Every breakthrough was carefully documented, encrypted, and prepared for strategic release. The team understood that information was the most powerful weapon they possessed. Across the globe, similar research centers worked in quiet coordination. In Tokyo, a team developed quantum energy systems that could potentially solve generations of resource challenges. In Lagos, researchers created adaptive agricultural technologies that could transform barren landscapes into productive ecosystems. In Mumbai, communication specialists developed translation systems that went beyond language, systems that could understand cultural context and emotional nuance. The global research network operated like a single distributed intelligence. No single location held all the information. Instead, breakthroughs were shared through quantum-encrypted channels, each piece of research building upon the last with remarkable speed. Dr. Elena Reyes, whose initial discovery had sparked this entire movement, now worked closely with the global research team. Her archival skills proved crucial in understanding the historical context of their work. Each breakthrough was not just a technological advancement, but a strategic move in a complex game of galactic positioning. As the day drew to a close, Kira looked out over the research complex. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the Andean landscape. But inside the facility, the work continued. Lights flickered, holographic displays danced, and the quiet revolution moved forward. No one outside would understand what was happening. To the rest of the world, it appeared to be just another day of scientific research. But those inside knew the truth. They were writing the first chapter of humanity's true potential, a potential that would soon reshape the entire galaxy. The Galactic Council chamber fell silent as the first holographic presentation began. Representatives from hundreds of species watched with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. No one expected what was about to unfold. Ambassador Sofia Martinez stood at the center of the massive circular platform, her posture calm and measured. Behind her, a series of holographic displays began to shimmer into existence, each one telling a story that would challenge everything the Council believed about humanity. The first projection showed a breakthrough in medical technology. A complex three-dimensional model illustrated a revolutionary treatment protocol that could address genetic disorders across multiple species. Where previous medical approaches had been limited and species-specific, this solution demonstrated an unprecedented level of adaptive capabilities. "What you're seeing," Sophia began, her voice clear and confident, "is not just a medical breakthrough. It's a fundamental reimagining of how we approach biological challenges." The representatives leaned forward. The Zornak delegation, a species known for their clinical approach to scientific advancement, exchanged meaningful glances. Their chief representative, Ambassador Catal, adjusted his translation device, paying careful attention to every word. The presentation continued. Each holographic display revealed another layer of human innovation. Sustainable energy systems that could be adapted to multiple planetary environments. Communication technologies that could bridge linguistic and cultural gaps with unprecedented accuracy. Adaptive agricultural technologies that could transform seemingly impossible landscapes into productive ecosystems. But it was the final demonstration that truly captured everyone's attention. A holographic representation of the galaxy appeared, showing complex networks of communication, trade, and scientific exchange. Suddenly, the display began to shift. Existing communication pathways, rigid and hierarchical, started to transform. The network became more fluid, more dynamic, with information flowing in ways that defied traditional understanding. "We're not proposing to replace existing systems," Sophia explained. "We're offering a new approach to collaboration and innovation." Ambassador Kittle couldn't contain himself. "Impossible," he muttered, but his translation device caught the words and broadcast them across the chamber. Sophia smiled. "Nothing is impossible. We're simply looking at challenges from a different perspective." The presentation concluded with a series of collaborative proposals. Each one was carefully crafted to address long-standing challenges that had plagued the Galactic Council for generations. Water scarcity solutions for desert planets. Communication protocols that could bridge vast cultural differences. Economic models that prioritize collective growth over individual expansion. Behind the scenes, a complex network of human researchers watched the proceedings. Dr. Kira Nakamura and her team monitored every reaction, every subtle shift in the representative's body language. They had prepared for every possible scenario, with adaptive communication systems ready to respond to any challenge. The Galactic Council's usual procedural formalities seemed inadequate. This was more than a presentation. It was a fundamental challenge to the existing galactic order. As the initial shock began to wear off, the first questions started to emerge. Representatives from various species began to probe the details of the proposals, expecting to find weaknesses. Instead, they found something far more challenging, a comprehensive, adaptable approach that seemed to anticipate their every concern. Ambassador Martinez fielded each question with remarkable precision. Her responses were not just answers, but invitations to deeper collaboration. She demonstrated a level of diplomatic skill that went far beyond traditional negotiation. The human delegation had done something unprecedented. They hadn't come to demand or conquer. They had come to offer a new way of thinking about collective progress. As the first session drew to a close, the chamber buzzed with an energy nobody could quite define. The Galactic Council had just experienced something extraordinary, a presentation that challenged everything they thought they knew about humanity. Outside the chamber, the first seeds of a new galactic understanding had been planted. And nobody, not a single representative, understood just how profoundly their world was about to change. The research facility hummed with an intensity that bordered on controlled chaos. Dr. Marcus Chen stood at the center of a massive circular room, surrounded by holographic displays that represented the most advanced problem-solving system ever conceived by any known civilization. "Challenge received," announced the Central Artificial Intelligence System. Its voice was neutral, almost casual, but the implications were anything but ordinary. The challenge had come directly from the Galactic Council, a complex multidimensional problem that had stumped researchers for generations. It involved intricate resource allocation challenges across multiple star systems, with competing environmental, economic, and cultural constraints that had previously seemed impossible to reconcile. Where other research teams would have approached this as a linear problem, the human team saw it as a living, breathing ecosystem of possibilities. Dr. Aisha Okoye moved between holographic interfaces, her fingers dancing across quantum-responsive displays. Each movement triggered cascading simulations that explored millions of potential solutions simultaneously. The AI system wasn't just calculating, it was learning, adapting, evolving with each micro-calculation. "Look at the pattern," she called out to her colleagues. A complex three-dimensional model began to shift and change, revealing interconnections that no previous research had ever identified. The team represented the most diverse group of problem solvers ever assembled. Economists worked alongside environmental scientists. Cultural anthropologists collaborated with quantum physicists. Each discipline brought a unique perspective, creating a collaborative approach that defied traditional scientific boundaries. Dr. Chen watched as the first potential solutions began to emerge. They weren't just answers. They were living solutions that could adapt and change based on new information. "The key isn't finding a single solution," he explained to a group of visiting researchers. "It's creating a system that can continuously evolve and respond to changing conditions." Across the facility, similar teams worked on challenges that had previously been considered unsolvable. In one laboratory, a team developed communication protocols that could bridge vast cultural differences. Another group worked on adaptive energy systems that could transform entire planetary ecosystems. The Galactic Council's challenge was more than just a test. It was a deliberate attempt to expose potential weaknesses in human research capabilities. Instead, they were about to witness something entirely unexpected. As hours passed, the research team's approach became clear. They weren't trying to solve the problem in a traditional sense. They were creating a living, adaptive solution that could continue to evolve and improve long after the initial challenge was met. The first complete simulation dropped into the Galactic Council's communication network. It wasn't just a solution. It was a comprehensive framework that addressed challenges across multiple dimensions. Ambassador Sofia Martinez monitored the initial reactions. The Council's representatives would be studying every detail, looking for any potential weakness. But there was none to be found. The solution proposed by the human research team didn't just solve the immediate challenge. It provided a new approach to complex problem solving that could be applied across multiple disciplines and civilizations. "They're not going to believe this," muttered Dr. Okoye, watching the initial data transfer. Dr. Chen smiled. "That's exactly the point." In the research facility's central monitoring room, a massive holographic display showed the real-time global network of human researchers. From Tokyo to Lagos, from Sao Paulo to New Delhi, teams were working in perfect synchronization. Each breakthrough, each small discovery, was immediately shared across the global network. The Galactic Council had issued a challenge, expecting to expose limitations. Instead, they had unleashed something far more powerful, a collaborative intelligence that could reshape entire civilizations. As the final simulation completed its transfer, Dr. Chen knew they had done more than solve a problem. They had demonstrated a fundamentally new approach to understanding complex systems. The intellectual battlefield had a new champion, and humanity was just getting started. The Global Communications Center looked more like an artistic installation than a traditional media hub. Holographic displays cascaded with information from thousands of sources, creating a living, breathing tapestry of human storytelling. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood at the center of the room, overseeing the most ambitious communication project in human history. This wasn't just about sharing information. It was about reframing the entire galactic narrative. "We're not fighting against something," she explained to her team. "We're fighting for something." The communication strategy was multi-layered and brilliantly complex. Each piece of content was carefully crafted to do more than inform. It was designed to create understanding. Documentary series explored the hidden histories of multiple galactic civilizations. Interactive research platforms invited species from across the galaxy to contribute their own perspectives. A breakthrough documentary series began broadcasting across multiple communication networks. The first episode explored the systematic suppression of developing civilizations by the Galactic Council. But unlike traditional exposed documentaries, this series approached the subject with nuance, empathy, and a forward-looking perspective. Dr. Kai Chen, a lead narrative designer, had spent months developing the communication approach. "It's not about blame," he would often say. "It's about understanding and moving forward." The first episode focused on the concept of collective potential. It showcased how different civilizations had been limited by existing galactic structures. Personal stories from researchers, diplomats, and everyday citizens across multiple species created a powerful narrative of shared challenges and untapped potential. On a quantum-encrypted communication network, researchers began sharing collaborative platforms. Scientists from different species could now work together in ways that were previously impossible. Translation systems went beyond mere language conversion. They captured cultural nuances, emotional contexts, and collaborative potential. Ambassador Sofia Martinez oversaw the diplomatic side of the communication strategy. She understood that changing the narrative wasn't just about sharing information. It was about creating new ways of understanding. In a groundbreaking move, the human communication team invited representatives from marginalized species to co-create content. These weren't interviews or secondary sources. These were full collaborative productions that gave voice to civilizations that had been systematically silenced. The Zornak communication archives, long considered impenetrable, suddenly became accessible through a new collaborative translation platform. Cultural exchange programs began to emerge, bridging gaps that had existed for generations. "We're creating a new language of understanding," Dr. Rodriguez explained during a private briefing. "Not just in words, but in how we approach collective challenges." The communication strategy was deliberately non-confrontational. Instead of attacking existing power structures, it offered alternative perspectives. Each piece of content was an invitation to think differently, to collaborate, to reimagine what was possible. Social media platforms developed by the research team allowed for unprecedented levels of cross-species communication. A researcher on a distant mining colony could now share insights with colleagues across hundreds of star systems, with translation and cultural context built directly into the platform. Educational content became a primary focus. Interactive learning platforms allowed young members of different species to collaborate on problem-solving challenges. These weren't just educational tools, they were bridges between civilizations. The Galactic Council watched with a mixture of confusion and growing concern. This wasn't the confrontation they had expected. It was something far more challenging, a fundamental reimagining of how civilizations could interact. As the first week of the communication campaign concluded, something remarkable began to happen. Species that had been isolated for generations started to connect. Collaborative research platforms began to generate breakthrough insights. The rigid boundaries between civilizations started to blur. Dr. Rodriguez looked over the initial data reports. The numbers were beyond their most optimistic projections. They weren't just changing the narrative. They were creating an entirely new way of understanding collective potential. "We're just getting started," she said quietly, watching the holographic displays dance with possibilities. The galactic narrative was being rewritten, and humanity was holding the pen. The Galactic Council's central chamber had never felt so tense. Representatives from hundreds of species sat in carefully arranged seating, their various physiological responses creating a subtle but palpable electrical tension in the air. Ambassador Sofia Martinez stood at the center of the circular platform, her presentation prepared with surgical precision. Behind her, a series of holographic displays began to shimmer into existence, each one a carefully crafted invitation to reimagine galactic cooperation. "We're not here to dismantle your existing systems," she began, her voice carrying a calm certainty that belied the revolutionary nature of her proposal. "We're here to evolve them." The first holographic display showed a complex network of interstellar connections. Unlike previous galactic maps that highlighted territorial boundaries and resource conflicts, this visualization demonstrated potential pathways of collaborative development. Lines of communication pulsed with dynamic energy, showing how different civilizations could work together in ways never before imagined. Ambassador Kitol of the Zornak delegation leaned forward, his crystalline exoskeleton reflecting the holographic light. He had been the most vocal skeptic during previous discussions, but something about this presentation was different. Dr. Marcus Chen, seated behind Martinez, monitored the room's subtle reactions. Years of research had prepared them for this moment. The presentation wasn't just a proposal, it was a comprehensive reimagining of galactic potential. The next display revealed a series of breakthrough technologies. But these weren't simply human innovations. Each technology was a collaborative effort, developed through joint research programs that had been quietly established over the past months. Scientists from different species had worked together, breaking down barriers that had existed for generations. "Collaboration is not a weakness," Martinez continued. "It is our greatest strength." A murmur passed through the chamber. The universal translation systems captured a complex range of emotional responses: confusion, intrigue, and a growing sense of possibility. The proposal went far beyond traditional diplomatic frameworks. It suggested a new governance model that was adaptive, dynamic, and responsive to the unique challenges of different species. No longer would a centralized council make decisions that impacted entire civilizations. Instead, a more fluid, collaborative approach would emerge. Dr. Aisha Okoy's research on adaptive communication systems became the foundation of the new proposal. Her work demonstrated how different species could communicate and collaborate, not by forcing uniformity, but by celebrating their unique differences. The holographic displays began to show real-world examples. A terraforming project that had previously been impossible now showed remarkable progress. Resource-sharing initiatives that had been blocked by bureaucratic constraints were now generating unprecedented opportunities for multiple species. Ambassador Kitol could no longer remain silent. "How is this possible?" he asked, his translation device capturing the mixture of wonder and skepticism in his voice. Martinez smiled. "By recognizing that our differences are not barriers. They are opportunities." The final portion of the presentation was perhaps the most radical. A comprehensive plan for shared scientific research, cultural exchange, and collective problem-solving. But this wasn't a top-down approach. Every aspect of the proposal was designed to be adaptive, to change and grow with the needs of different civilizations. Behind the scenes, a global network of human researchers watched every moment. Quantum-encrypted communication systems captured every subtle reaction, every micro-expression. They were prepared for any possible response. The Galactic Council had expected a confrontation. Instead, they were being offered a transformation. As the presentation concluded, something extraordinary happened. The rigid formalities of the Council began to break down. Representatives who had been diplomatic opponents for generations began to have genuine conversations. The barriers were not just falling, they were being reimagined. Dr. Chen caught Martinez's eye. They both understood that this was more than a diplomatic presentation. This was the first step toward a fundamentally new way of understanding collective potential. The galactic civilization was about to change forever, and humanity had just extended the invitation. The research complex near the galactic core pulsed with an energy that defied conventional understanding. Here, at the absolute frontier of scientific exploration, Humanity's most ambitious project was about to reach its critical moment. Dr. Kira Nakamura stood before a massive holographic interface. Her team gathered around her. They had been working toward this moment for years, a breakthrough that would fundamentally challenge everything known about interstellar communication and collective intelligence. "Initiate quantum resonance protocol," she commanded. The room erupted into a symphony of technological activation. Quantum processors that had been carefully developed over decades began to synchronize. Each system was more than a mere computer. They were adaptive intelligence networks that could learn, evolve, and communicate in ways no previous technology had ever achieved. Ambassador Sofia Martinez watched from a secured communication hub, connected to the research team through a quantum-encrypted network. This was more than a scientific experiment. It was a diplomatic strategy that would reshape galactic understanding. The first wave of quantum communication burst across the galactic communication networks. It wasn't a message in any traditional sense. It was a complex, multi-dimensional communication that carried information, emotional context, and adaptive potential simultaneously. Where previous communication technologies had been limited by language and cultural barriers, this new system could translate not just words, but entire contextual experiences. A researcher on one side of the galaxy could now share not just information, but the entire nuanced experience of a scientific discovery. Dr. Marcus Chen monitored the initial responses. The Galactic Council's communication networks began to react in ways no one had anticipated. Firewalls crumbled. Bureaucratic communication barriers dissolved. For the first time, different species could truly understand each other's perspectives. "It's not about overriding their systems," Dr. Chen explained to his team. "It's about creating a new way of connecting." The quantum communication network did something unprecedented. It didn't just share information, it created a collective intelligence that could adapt and grow. Species that had been isolated for generations suddenly found themselves part of a larger, more dynamic conversation. On a distant research station, a team of Zornak scientists found themselves collaborating with human researchers in a way that transcended traditional communication barriers. Complex scientific challenges that had seemed impossible now became opportunities for collective problem-solving. Ambassador Martinez watched the initial data streams with a mixture of excitement and careful calculation. This was the moment they had been preparing for, a demonstration of humanity's true potential that went far beyond traditional technological advancement. The quantum communication network began to reveal something extraordinary. The barriers between species were not just bureaucratic, they were fundamentally rooted in limited ways of understanding. This new system offered a way to bridge those gaps in a truly revolutionary manner. Dr. Aisha Okoye's research on adaptive communication systems had been the key. By understanding communication as a living, evolving process rather than a fixed set of rules, they had created something entirely new. Across the galaxy, communication networks began to change. Research platforms that had been isolated became collaborative spaces. Cultural exchange programs emerged spontaneously. The rigid boundaries between civilizations started to blur. The Galactic Council's communication systems were the first to truly feel the impact. Centuries of bureaucratic isolation began to dissolve. Representatives who had been diplomatic opponents for generations suddenly found themselves able to truly understand each other's perspectives. "We're not conquering," Dr. Nakamura said quietly to her team. "We're connecting." The quantum communication network did more than share information. It created a new way of understanding collective potential. Species that had been technologically limited suddenly found themselves part of a larger, more dynamic conversation. As the first hours of the communication experiment concluded, something remarkable happened. The initial data suggested that this was more than a technological breakthrough. It was the beginning of a new way of understanding collective intelligence. Dr. Chen looked at the holographic displays, watching the complex communication patterns emerge. "We're just getting started," he said, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. The galaxy was about to change forever, and humanity had just extended an invitation to a new way of existing. 1 year after the initial quantum communication breakthrough, The galaxy looked fundamentally different. The Galactic Center for Collaborative Development stood as a testament to humanity's transformative approach. What was once a rigid administrative complex now pulsed with a living, adaptive energy that defied traditional understanding of governance and cooperation. Ambassador Sofia Martinez walked through the central hall, her steps echoing with the weight of the changes they had initiated. Representatives from hundreds of species moved through the space, engaged in conversations that would have been impossible just months earlier. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood near a holographic display, monitoring the ongoing collaborative projects. Each visualization represented more than just data. It was a living map of collective potential. Resource-sharing initiatives, scientific research collaborations, and cultural exchange programs crisscrossed the galactic map in intricate dynamic patterns. "We didn't conquer," Dr. Rodriguez explained to a group of young researchers. "We invited." The transformation had been comprehensive. Where previous galactic structures had been hierarchical and restrictive, the new system was fluid and adaptive. Species that had been marginalized for generations now found themselves at the center of collaborative problem-solving efforts. Dr. Kira Nakamura's quantum communication network had proven to be the key. It wasn't just a technology. It was a new way of understanding collective intelligence. Communication barriers dissolved, replaced by a more nuanced, empathetic form of exchange that went beyond traditional language. The first major test came with a complex ecological restoration project. A star system that had been considered environmentally devastated now became a collaborative research initiative. Scientists from 15 different species worked together, their adaptive communication systems allowing for unprecedented levels of cooperation. Ambassador Kitol of the Zornak delegation, once the most vocal skeptic, now stood as a primary advocate for the new galactic approach. His crystalline exoskeleton reflected the holographic displays, a living metaphor for the transparency that now defined interstellar relations. "We were blind," Kitol often said in public addresses. "Now we can see the true potential of collective intelligence." The economic impact was equally transformative. Traditional resource competition gave way to collaborative development strategies. Species that had been economically isolated now found themselves part of a dynamic, supportive network of innovation and shared growth. Dr. Marcus Chen's adaptive research platforms became the new standard for scientific exploration. Research that would have taken generations now occurred in months. Breakthroughs were shared instantly, with every species contributing and benefiting. The human approach had fundamentally changed the concept of power. It wasn't about domination or control, but about creating systems that could grow, adapt, and support collective potential. A new generation of leaders emerged, not defined by their species, but by their capacity for collaborative thinking. Young researchers from across the galaxy began to see themselves as part of a larger, more dynamic collective. The quantum communication network continued to evolve. It was more than a technology. It was a living system of collective intelligence that grew more sophisticated with each interaction. Ambassador Martinez reflected on the journey. They had entered this process with a simple goal: to challenge the existing system. They had achieved something far more profound. In the central hall, a group of young researchers from different species worked together on a complex problem. Their communication was seamless, their collaboration intuitive. They represented the first generation of a truly interconnected galactic civilization. "We're still learning," Dr. Rodriguez said, watching the researchers. And that's the most important part. The story of humanity's transformation was far from over. But they had created something extraordinary, a new way of understanding collective potential that went beyond any single species or civilization. As the sun set on the galactic center, the holographic displays continued to pulse with life. Each connection, each moment of collaboration, was a testament to what was possible when civilizations chose understanding over conflict. The galaxy had changed, and humanity had shown the way forward.